In the last video, we set up a 10 volt peak-to-peak voltage with a frequency of 5 kilohertz. And now we want to look at that on the oscilloscope. So the first step is we want to turn on the power. And here's our signal. So it's been connected to the output of the function generator. Now it's connected, as you can see here, to channel 1 of the oscilloscope. So we need to kind of set some things up so that we can view the signal properly. So the first thing is we want to make sure we have channel 1 selected, which we do. And we want to set the coupling to be AC, since this is an AC signal, and I'm going to use this little knob. Oops, coupling. I'll push this in again. So this sets up coupling to AC. The second thing is for the probe, we want to make sure. We want to make sure the probe is on a 1-to-1 ratio on the probe setting. And for the trigger, and the trigger menu's over here, which you can probably barely see on screen, but the trigger menu, we want to set the trigger type to edge, sources channel 1, and the slope is rising. Trigger type edge, sources channel 1, the slope is rising. Now let's go back to channel 1, and we want to set volts per division, which is this large knob here for vertical. So it's actually set on a good setting of 2 volts per division, which you can see in the top right corner. So if I were to set this to 1, it would be off the screen. If I set it to like 10, then 10 volts per division, it's going to be too hard to see. So 2 volts per division is a pretty good setting. And for the time period, which is this large knob here, the horizontal knob, I've got it at 100 microseconds. So if I put it at 50 microseconds, that might be a little better. So 50 microseconds is this, you set the horizontal sensitivity with this large knob, whereas the vertical sensitivity was with this large knob. So now I can actually see the signal. So how do I make measurements? Well, I can use the small knob here to the right, and I'm going to put my rising edge centered in the middle of the screen, so it's centered at 0. And then I'm going to use the cursors button to select different cursors. So to measure the period, I want to use X1 and X2. So I'm going to select X1, and then I'm going to use the knob over here to the right to set X1. And I'm going to put X1 right in the middle on the rising edge. And then I'm going to select X2 and put that on the next rising edge. There. So that looks about right. Okay, and so that's showing us that the delta X here is 200 microseconds. So that's 200 microseconds. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions, 50 microseconds per division. So that looks right, 200 microseconds. So if I take the reciprocal of that, then I will get 5 kilohertz. So you want to use the X1 and X2 cursors when you're measuring period or phase shift. How do I measure the voltage? Well, you can kind of look at it and and estimate by using this 2 volts per division. I've got 2, 4, and I'm about halfway up on the 3rd division. So that would be 2 divisions, 4 divisions, and then half of a division, right? So that would be 2 volts, 4 volts, and then half of a division would be another volt. So that'd be 5 volts peak and 5 volts negative peak. But you can also use the Y cursors. So if I use the Y cursors, Y1, I can set Y1 at the peak of the signal and Y2 at the bottom peak. Okay, and so that gives me, if I look here on my delta Y, 10.27, which is not exactly 10, but it's pretty close. And if I wanted to get exactly 10, I could go over to my function generator and select amplitude, which I'll do now. And decrease it just a little bit. Okay, and so if I reposition my Y2 cursor about there, so maybe a little bit more, I'll decrease it a little bit more. Reposition my Y2 cursor and my Y1 cursor. I'll reposition my Y1 cursor about midway through about midway of the curve. And you can see now that it's at 9.975. So I adjusted my function generator to about 9.6 volts peak to peak, and it's showing here at 9.97. So there's a slight difference, but you want to look at the voltage on the oscilloscope to get the accurate reading. So that is just a really, really, really quick intro to using the oscilloscope, and hopefully that will be helpful.